How's it going guys, Chris here, and today we're going to be checking out all of the Haxion brood enemy types in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. A bunch of cybernetically enhanced bounty hunters and droids, all working for the Haxion brood crime syndicate to try and take you down. So the first enemy type you'll be pitted against is the Haxion brood Grenadier, in the form of Koresh Lim, who's going to come swooping in via jetpack to attack you while you're venturing through Kobo. Grenadiers use a pretty wide variety of different weapons and tools, of course, one being that jetpack, allowing them to shoot off into the air and dodge your melee strikes and generally make them harder to hit in the fight. Hovering around above your head might be a good way to avoid getting slashed up by that lightsaber, but that jetpack can only be used in short bursts, leaving the Grenadier more vulnerable while they're grounded in between. The weapon of choice is a high-powered blaster rifle, firing off a combination of normal and unblockable charge-up shots, letting them attack you effectively over range, often while they're strafing around in the air, making deflected shots less likely to land on target. But that's not the only thing these guys like to use against you, as you can also expect to see lots of grenades getting thrown your way too, as the name might have suggested. Grenadiers will often fly over to do bombing runs overhead, softening you up with a bunch of deadly explosives, with them also lobbing cluster grenades at you too, in between their normal rifle attacks, which are resistant to force abilities and therefore can't be pushed back. Grenadiers are particularly common Haxion brood types, with Koresh being the only named one in the game, aside from a few unnamed Grenadiers that'll assist the other bounty hunters, that is. One enemy you'll see a lot more of though is the Shot Commando, which uses both aggressive and defensive tactics to try and mix things up in the fight. Having an upgraded deployable shield capable of deflecting blaster fire and blocking off lightsaber strikes, the Shot Commando is going to use a combination of both long and short ranged attacks, shooting at you over distance with a blaster rifle, while rushing in with that shield to batter you up close. That blaster rifle can chip away at your health if you're not careful, with the Shot Commando often charging in with a special unblockable attack in between, though so long as you jump out of the way in time, they'll usually run past, temporarily exposing their backs, which you can then slice up while they're facing the wrong way. You will need to watch out for a sneaky shockwave attack when they overcharge their shield to unleash a mini electrical pulse, something you'll need to jump over if you're in short range. But generally these guys can be quite easy to read and predict, with that shield only being able to withstand so much damage before it becomes useless. They might be able to block off more of your strikes, making them some of the more resistant bounty hunters you'll need to take down, but once that guard drops, Shot Commandos are extremely vulnerable to your lightsaber combos. You'll just need to be patient and strike hard whenever their stamina's drained. With the Haxion brood being known for trading illegal droid parts, not all of these parts would be sold on, as some of them are actually used to construct new droids, reprogrammed to serve the organisation, acting as heavily built bounty hunters who don't ask any questions. These are the bounty droids, some of the more hard-wearing enemies that tend to use a lot of tough strikes and lunges up close, many of which are unblockable and chained together, which you'll need to dive out of the way of to avoid taking hefty chunks of damage. They're fairly slow-moving enemies that'll stomp around, typically advancing towards you to try and smash you around using those arms. And although they'll mainly rely on short-range melee attacks most of the time, they do have sneaky wrist blasters for attacking over distance, should you be just out of reach. Bounty droids definitely look nastier than they actually are, as although they can soak up quite a lot of damage and throw a bunch of heavy attacks your way, those slow movements and lack of any defensive gadgets or abilities, such as a shield or jetpack, makes that health bar pretty easy to chip away over time, with both ranged lightsaber throws and blaster shots, or up-close lightsaber flurries in between their own attacks. Just keep the pressure on while watching out for those unblockable punches, rams and charges, and you should be able to turn those bounty droids into scrap fine enough. Next up is the Haxion brood Gunslinger, who you can probably assume prefers to take down their targets using guns over range. Gunslingers don't have heavy weapons or jetpacks, mainly reliant on just a pair of blaster pistols, which they'll dual wield to combine rapid flurries of bolts along with hard-hitting charge-up projectiles. Their attacks can be pretty relentless, with shots flying at you constantly over the fight, which you'll need to block, avoid or deflect to help chip away at their health, while preventing them from chipping away at yours. You can also expect gunslingers to be pretty accurate with those pistols too, having had quite a lot of practice using them. And the fact that they're not weighed down by any heavy armour allows them to be more nimble and lightweight, strafing and rolling around to avoid deflected shots and incoming fire, also helping to get away from your strikes up close too. But that blaster fire isn't the only thing you'll need to be careful of, with gunslingers also using throwables like shock and flash grenades to try and give them an edge. Shock grenades can be lobbed in close range to hold you in place while they pepper you with gunfire, and flash grenades will help them escape if you're getting a little bit too close for comfort. With them having a big disadvantage in close quarters, mainly utilising ranged weapons, it's generally best to get up close and hack them to pieces whenever you have a clear opening, deflecting their own shots back at them in between. In this fight, it definitely helps to be aggressive. Acting in a similar way to the Grenadiers, the Haxion Brood Bounty Hunters are also kitted out with their very own jetpacks, able to hover around the arena, flying out of harm's way to make them a lot trickier to deal damage to up close. Although they're able to avoid a lot of your attacks by buzzing off into the air, those jetpacks won't last forever, needing to eventually land on the ground to recharge, giving you a nice opportunity to strike with a bunch of close-range melee attacks. Like most of the other Haxion Brood enemies, Bounty Hunters are also armed with blaster rifles, capable of normal fire and charge-up shots, which can be deflected back of course, as per usual. But they've also got a few other tricks up their sleeves, being armed with wrist-mounted rockets, giving them a pretty accurate missile attack that can be quite awkward to avoid. Not to mention a wrist flamethrower too, spraying out plumes of fire to try and keep you at bay, or even being used to burn your hair off as the Bounty Hunter does strafing runs from above. Having all of these different weapons to watch out for, along with that jetpack to help them keep some distance, sometimes makes them a tricky enemy to predict. Bounty Hunters combine these attacks together, but a lot of them can be turned against them using force abilities and your lightsaber. So just be vigilant and get ready to dive in with melee combos whenever that jetpack runs out of steam. Just like the other bounty droids, the Brawler variant is another type made from illegal parts, and although they look almost identical, these ones are specifically built to beat the living crap out of their opponents. You can tell these guys apart from the lack of a wrist-mounted blaster on the droid's right arm, also being restricted to close-range bubbles, kicks, jabs and even hand claps, rather than the unblockable charges and slams the other ones use. They've also typically got blue paint jobs too, apart from Joe the Cannibal. And with pretty much all of their attacks being melee based, this makes them deadlier up close, but also much more predictable, with range attacks like lightsaber throws and blaster shots being an effective way to cut down bits of health from a safer distance. You can expect to bump into Brawlers more often than the blaster wielding bounty droids, so it's best to get used to their attack patterns, learning to parry those rapid flurries to help sap away at their stamina, while remembering to dart out of the way whenever they're about to unleash one of those unblockable strikes, which can be quite tricky to avoid if you're getting stuck in with that lightsaber up close. With all this said, they are a bit dozy and fairly easy to keep distance from, so in situations where there's a few enemies around to deal with at once, it's often best to take down the other guys first, while the Brawler just plods around slowly, making its way towards you. The Commando kinda blends together a few tricks from some of the other Haxion Brood enemies, while throwing in some of their own. Although they've got a deployable shield, they don't rely on it quite as much as the Shock Commandos, using similar bashes and charges while protecting themselves from incoming damage, but only when that shield is actually activated. This leaves them much more open to your attacks, and a lot more vulnerable to getting sliced up by your lightsaber combos up close, with them not utilising that shield as much as they probably should do. The shield tends to be used more so as a weapon instead in a lot of cases, with it being able to charge up energy and launch concussive blasts in your direction, to knock you back, deal damage, and generally break your flow of combat. You can expect blaster shots to come flying your way too throughout the fight, both standard and charge-up shots, with that rifle being the main thing they'll attack you with over range. Though if they're getting a bit uncomfortable with you hacking them up with melee strikes, Commandos are also known to lob flash grenades at you too, lighting up the screen, disrupting your little rampage, plus allowing them to retreat to a safer position, where they can carry on firing at you with those blaster shots and shield bursts. So after helping you track down all the other Haxion Brood foes, Cage Vander is pretty quick to stab you in the back, compelled to take you in by herself, with all the competition now being wiped out, and with you now having a massive bounty on your head too. Cage acts a little bit like the Gunslingers, an agile opponent who dual wields a pair of powerful blaster pistols, but she's also got quite a lot of unique attacks to add a bit more flavour to the fight and keep you on your toes. At range, she's merely going to resort to blaster fire, as you'd probably expect, though being kitted out with a pair of rocket-powered boots, well, this lets her throw in a few surprises, mixing that blaster fire up with quick dash attacks to hit you over longer distances, with them also being used in combination with melee strikes, which are generally unblockable and awkward to dodge. Getting a rocket boot to the face is going to knock you backwards, break your combo, and leave you open to successive attacks. And with that being Cage's main thing to try and stop you from getting too carried away with that lightsaber up close, it's definitely a move you're going to have to get used to seeing quite a lot, especially if she's pinned to the side of the arena with you ripping into that health bar with aggressive tactics. Staying on the offensive is generally the best way to tackle this fight, though you'll still need to watch out for those dash lunges which can hit you over range, while also being aware of grenade attacks too, where she'll either drop them and sneak out of the way of their blast radius, or throw them up and shooting the detonator mid-air to blow them up instantly, giving you little time to react or get out of the way. The fight's going to get more and more intense as it goes on, with Cage chaining different attacks together to try and get the better of you, but once you've depleted all of that health, you'll prove that betraying you was a bit of a dumb idea, and finish her off for good. Well, not exactly, because Boba Fett decides to show up and stop that from happening, being ordered to go after Cage and take her in, which you're gonna let him do, of course. So those are all the Haxion Brood enemy types you can expect to find in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up on your way out, and be sure to check out my other guides focusing on the Galactic Empire, Bedlam Raiders, and creature enemies that you'll also find in the game too. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll be seeing you in that next one.